So we're continuing, inshallah. This is the second lecture where we're commenting on Kitabu Ta'lim al-Muta'allim. We started last week. And last week we talked about what the book is about, the importance of manners in general. And in particular, why do we need manners, akhlaq, when we're seeking knowledge, pursuing the pleasure of Allah Azza wa Jal through learning. So why do we need manners? And we talked about the book a little bit, the author a little bit, the reason for writing it, and the virtue of knowledge. And inshallah, this is the second chapter. And the second chapter is about an-niyya. في النية في حال التعلم. That is, what intention do you have when you're learning? And this is one of the most important chapters in the book, and in fact, in any human endeavor, because he says, ثم لا بد من النية في زمان تعلم العلم. That is, when you're learning, you must have an intention, because it is the basis of all actions. So any human endeavor, in fact, not only when we're talking about طلب العلم, seeking knowledge, but in anything that you want to do, your salah, siyam, fasting, zakah, hajj, umrah, but also what we can call non-religious acts as well, all of them are determined by intention. Because the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, where you see that the scholars begin their books with, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Indeed, actions are determined by intentions, are by intention. Meaning their success and failure depends on their intention. Where you go with your action, where it takes you, depends on an intention. And that is basically asking yourself, well, what is the goal behind this action? So he says, why is that the case? I mean, why is it important? He says, كم من عمل يتصور بصورة عمل الدنيا ثم يصير بحسن النية من أعمال الآخرة. He says, how many actions, and on the exterior, it looks like a non-religious act, an act belonging to this world. But because of a good intention, it becomes an act belonging to the hereafter. And also, he says, and how many actions, they look on the exterior to belong to the hereafter, but with a bad intention, they belong to this world. So think of an example of an action that belongs apparently on the exterior to this world, but in fact it is for the hereafter. Give me an example if you can think of one thing. Many. There could be many. But think of an example. Nah? Teaching Quran. So that's an action that apparently looks for the hereafter. Because teaching the Quran is ibadah. Right? So that's an action for the hereafter. But how can it turn out to be for the dunya, not for the hereafter? Na'am. Sahih. Sahih. So when it's not done for Allah, but done for this world, let's say for bragging. I want to improve my recitation so that I can impress people, or so that people say he's a good teacher of the Quran. So that is an action that is for the hereafter, but then by the intention, it belongs to this world. And so Allah Azza wa Jal, for that person, what will Allah say to him? Or to us if we do it, what will Allah say? No reward for you. Because you already had sought it in this dunya, you were given that. Maybe not, but you were given that. You looked for it here, and you were given that in here. I have nothing for you. Now, the opposite. What is an action that apparently on the exterior belongs to this dunya, but with a good intention could be belong to the akhirah? Sadaqah. No, sadaqah is ibadah. Working. So you can be working, any type of work, right? Manual labor, right? An office job, whatever it is, whether it's very simple or very sophisticated. But what is, helping. Helping people, right? Can apparently could be done because you're a good neighbor, right? Okay, but how with a good intention it can belong to the actions of the hereafter when it's done for Allah Azza wa Jal. So I'm working, but I'm working for Lillah Azza wa Jal. So that makes it for the akhirah. So seeking ilm, seeking knowledge, is an action of the hereafter or action of the dunya? Hereafter. Because it's ibadah. Seeking knowledge, religious knowledge, is a ibadah. So if the person does not have the good intention behind it, that person will be punished on the day of judgment, because Allah will tell him, you took a ibadah of mine And you learned, why? Because you are seeking people and not seeking me. Whether it is learning the Quran or whether it is learning the Hadith. And by the way, it does also affect what you get out of it. It affects how you read a book. What is your intention? What is your goal behind it? That is, if I'm going to seek knowledge, but my intention is what? I want to be able to argue with people. Like I don't want to sit and look dumb. They tell me this and tell me that. They have this evidence, that evidence. When I want to sit, I want to memorize all the evidence so I can engage in discussion and win the argument. So if I do that, what I will be learning is how to argue. That's what I will be learning. If I'm reading a book, and out of this book I say, because you can have a lot of intentions behind reading a book, okay? Even if it's a non-religious book, but what's your goal behind it? If I say, well, I want to impress people with how much I know. So the way that you're going to be learning the book or learning from the book, how you will read it is different. You look at everything that is strange, peculiar, people don't know. That's what's going to stick in your mind. So you learn that and you're going to go on impressing people. Oh, did you know about this? Did you know about that? So that people will say, MashaAllah, he has vast knowledge. And you continue to read because of this. I'm seeking my reward in this dunya and I'm getting it from people's pleasure and adulation. But if my intention is different, if my intention, let's say, I want to solve problems through reading this book, then I'll read this book looking for solutions, right? If I say I want to understand this book because I want to be able to relate it to myself, to relate it to other books in the field, I'll be approaching that book differently. So even just to study, ask yourself, well, what's the goal behind this book? In fact, what's the goal behind choosing this major in college or university? Because what I'm talking about here, or what the Shaykh is talking about here, is not just only relevant to a halaqah. It's relevant to any pursuit of knowledge that you have. So why am I choosing this major and not that major? So if you're a person, let's take medicine. If you want to study medicine to be rich, that's very different than if you want to study medicine to help people. Yeah? What do you study? How much you study? What are you going to focus on? Where you specialize? How you treat your patients? What do you get out of it is all very different. So all that is based on what? Intention. So the virtue of an act, especially religiously, but even non-religiously, is all determined by intention. So what can you have? What type of intention, good intention you should have when you are seeking knowledge? So he says, وَيَنْبَغِي, that is, he must do what? Have these intentions. And actually, the more the better. The more the better. The pleasure of Allah and seeking the hereafter. وَإِزَالَةُ الْجَهْلِ عَنْ نَفْسِهِ, and removing ignorance from himself and from other people. وَإِحْيَاءِ الدِّينِ وَإِبْقَاءِ الْإِسْلَامِ, and reviving this religion and protecting Islam. Because Islam stays through knowledge. And he cannot be a person of taqwa and zuhd while ignorant. So see here the string of intentions that he has. And by the way, the more intentions you have, the better when you do an act. Because Allah rewards you according to how many good intentions you have. If you have more of them, then even better and better. So he says here, for Allah Azza wa Jal. Meaning that I know that when I'm doing this, this brings me closer to Allah. I know that when I'm learning this, and as we said, there are different levels of pursuing knowledge. We said, attending the khutbah with the proper intention, that's talabu ilm. Being in a halaqah, that's talabu ilm. Listening to lectures online, like a series of lectures online, that's talabu ilm. Attending halaqas, that's talabu ilm. Weekend seminars, that's talabu. So different levels. So even at the very basic level, you ask yourself, why am I attending this khutbah? Why am I attending this halaqah? What do I want to get out of it? The more that you have, the more that Allah will give you. So, if I learn this, I'll be closer to Allah. If I learn this, I'll climb higher in Jannah. If I learn this, I will remove ignorance. Because we are born ignorant. Do we know anything? No. Until Allah teaches us. And if I don't know something, then I'm prone to make mistakes. How am I going to worship Allah? I do not know. How do I avoid haram? I do not know. How do I fix my marriage? I do not know. How do I raise my children? I don't know. How do I avoid the haram when I study, when I sell, when I buy? I do not know. Until I learn. So when you learn, you protect yourself and you're no longer ignorant or as ignorant as you were before. So removing ignorance, that's a good intention. From yourself and then from others. Meaning if I know this, I want to share it with people. And when we do this, we protect ourselves from fitna. Because the fitna, when it comes, what's the problem? Why is the ummah? One of the reasons that the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is divided is what? There is hawa, where we know, but we like something else, so we don't follow what we know. There is that. But there's also what? Ignorance. I don't know a hadith, it's authentic or not. I follow all the weak or fabricated hadith. That's ignorance or not? That's fitna. So we're divided because of this. I don't know what the meaning of the Quran is, or I assign a meaning to it for my own self. That's fitna, and that's division among the ummah. I don't know what the consensus of the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is. So I say out of my own mind, this is halal and this is haram. Oh, this shouldn't be like this, but that should be like this. And it contradicts centuries and centuries of what the scholars have said. This is what it should be. That's ignorance. So the division of the ummah also happens because of ignorance. That's why he says also, وَإِحْيَاءُ الدِّينِ, reviving the religion. And the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam will never regain its strength until it gets back what? Ilm. And it lost its strength when it lost what? Ilm. And then jahl, that ignorance, started to spread, and superstition as a result started to spread. If you go 100, 100, 200 years ago and you scan the Muslim lands, it's full of superstitions. They believe, or we believed, anything and everything. Right? And why is that? Because we didn't have ilm. So when you spread ilm, when you gain it, you protect yourself. When you teach it to others, you protect them as well. So baqa'ul Islam, as he said, the revival or the continuity Islam is with ilm, and you cannot have taqwa with ignorance. And he said also, a piece of poetry, 2 verses, beautiful also. فَسَادٌ كَبِيرٌ, great ignorance. عَالِمٌ مُتَهَتِّكٌ, a scholar who is sinning. A scholar who's sinful. وَأَكْبَرُ مِنْهُ, and a greater corruption of that. جَاهِلٌ مُتَنَسِّكُ, that ignorant who is worshipping Allah Azza wa Jal. So these, he says, are 2 problems. هُمَا فِتْنَةٌ لِلْعَالَمِينَ عَظِيمَةٌ, they are a great fitna to people. If a person is trying to hold on to Islam. So what is he presenting here? He says these 2 individuals or patterns in life are very scary and very corrupt. One is a scholar who knows but what? Doesn't follow. Contradicts his actions with his deeds. Contradicts his knowledge with his deeds. So people will look at him and say what? And then whatever he's saying is not right. Because if it was right, he'd follow it. And they will start suspecting everybody, every religious person and every knowledgeable person, because they'll say, well, he was a hypocrite. If he believed in it, he would follow it. But since not, all of them are hypocrites. So that is a fitna. A person who has knowledge but does not follow it. So be wary of not being a fitna yourself. If you know, especially like within your family, within your community, you could be the person who's most knowledgeable. You could be. So you don't be a fitna to your family, meaning that you know, and they know that you know more than them, but your behavior contradicts your knowledge. You become a fitna to them, right? And a bigger fitna than that is jahilun mutanassiku. He's an ignorant person who's trying to worship Allah Azza wa Jal. Because where is the corruption there? Does he know how to? No. Good intention, but you do every mistake and everything wrong because you don't know what's right and what's wrong. So if there's a bid'ah, it looks like sunnah. If it's haram, it looks like halal because I have no idea. And when people, where's the fitna there? When people see him, they admire him because they think that he's religious, so they follow everything he says and everything that he does. So that's a fitna. So how do you solve both of these fitnas? The alim who knows needs to do what? Practice. And the ignorant who practices needs to what? Learn. And only when you have these 2, you have right balance and right type of taqwa. You must have ilm and you must have amal. If you miss one of them, that becomes a fitna. And he says, and also he a good intention to have, to thank Allah Azza wa Jal for His ni'mah, the ni'mah of aql, the ni'mah of sight, the ni'mah of hearing, to use it in things that Allah Azza wa Jal, the ni'mah of health. وَلَا يَنْوِي بِهِ, and he should not seek the intention of what? I want people to know me. I want people to listen to me. And not also seek the dunya from it. Seek, I want to be rich because of it. I want to learn, especially religious knowledge. Non-religious knowledge, if you learn it to be rich, that's fine. You want to be a doctor to be rich, go into business to be rich, that's fine as long as you're not greedy and you don't displease Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the ni'mah that you have. You're allowed to be rich, but you're not allowed with religious knowledge to seek it so that you'd be rich. Yeah? And not to be honored by people or honored by the sultan and so on and so on. And he quotes here Muhammad ibn al-Hasan rahimahullah just to showcase independence and how the scholars of before, and Muhammad ibn al-Hasan is a student of Abu Hanifa, how the scholars of before were not interested in people's praise or not dependent on them. He says, Muhammad ibn al-Hasan, he says, if all people were my slaves, yani I owned everybody, I had, in a sense, I controlled everybody, in a sense, owned them as my slaves, I would free all of them and not ask them for anything in return. Meaning that, he was saying that, if I had such or amount control over people, would I use them for my own good? He says, no, I would free all of them and not ask for anything in return afterwards. So in other words, right, if we want to translate this for today, that I would give but never ask anything for return. Because I do not need anything from them. What do I need it from? I want it from Allah Azza wa Jal. I don't want from them. And by the way, when a person is like that, Allah Azza wa Jal gives him. Because if you're not seeking it from people, but from Allah, Allah will provide for you. Even if it's not a lot, but Allah will provide for you. But if you are going to seek people's pleasure, you're going to have to sell what you have to please them. And then he says, وَذَلِكَ, why you shouldn't compromise your knowledge, religious knowledge, whatever it is, for people's sake. He says, لِأَنَّ مَنْ وَجَدَ لَذَّةَ الْعِلْمِ وَالْعَمَلَ بِهِ قَلَّمَا يَرْغَبُ فِي مَا عِنْدَ النَّاسِ. He says, but if you really find and taste the beauty of knowledge and applying it and practicing it, you will seldom seek what people have, because what people have is very insignificant and bitter compared to the sweetness of knowledge. As if you taste it, if you happen to learn the Quran and really taste the beauty of the Quran, learn the hadith and really taste the beauty of the hadith, you've never sold this for dollars, ever. Because he says this is far too precious for it to be sold for dollars or for gold or for silver, because you can buy with it what? Jannah. You can buy with it Jannah. Why would you sell it for dollars? Or somebody smiling and say, MashaAllah, you know. What do I do with that? You'll say to you. What do I do with that if he loves me today? And tomorrow if I say something that upsets him, he hates me. What do I do with your praise? Can I take it to the bank? Can I cash it? Doesn't benefit me. Can I take it to the akhirah and say, Ya Allah, so and so praised me, put me in Jannah? Doesn't help. But if Allah at this moment is happy with you, that is something that you can trust. That is something that you can bank on. Yes, that's something that is going to save me. He says, you should think about it, that your knowledge should only buy you the hereafter, because you spend a lot of time and effort learning. A lot of time and effort learning. Do not sell it cheap. Just like, what is the most exhausting major that you can think of? Being a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. And then after you go and you pass the bar and you take this exam and you get certified and you say, I'm going to open a shop in the street. Right? And just whatever you want to give me, right? Well, why? Did you learn for 10 years or so, right? So simply you can, open your own shack and just do that? Or did you want to actually have your own office? I'm not promoting, right, prestige in that, but I'm just saying that. You study for what? For the title, you want the money, you want the office, you want the respect among your peers, not to sell it cheap. And so the knowledge that you're going to seek, that is religious knowledge, is actually far more precious than medicine. Far more precious than being a lawyer or an engineer and all of this. And all these majors are needed, by the way. Do not put them down. They're needed, especially today. But religious knowledge is far superior to it because it buys the hereafter. Right? And he says also that talibul ilm should not be greedy, but be contented with what Allah Azza wa Jalla had provided for him. Because if you are greedy, you're going to humiliate yourself. You'll be looking for money, you'll be looking for wealth, you'll be looking who can give you and who will deny you. He says, don't be greedy, be contented with what Allah Azza wa Jalla had given you, and be humble. Be humble. Because also one of the problems when people seek knowledge, religious knowledge and non-religious knowledge, is that when you begin to learn, it gives you the impression that you know. And when you have the impression that you know, and you really do not know yet, but when you the impression that you know, you become what? Arrogant. Shut up, you don't know what I studied, you didn't study. Right? But that is a phenomenon of the ignorant who has not yet known, but he's starting to learn. Okay? So, I'm trying to remember exactly that saying. He says, al-ilm or ilm is thalathatu ashbar. Ilm is of 3 portions, or 3/3. 1, 2, 3. When you enter the first third of it, you do not know, but you think that you know. When you move on to the next third, you know that you do not know. When you move to the last third, you know that you will never know. Something like that. That is, the more that you know, the more that you discover that you do not know. The more that actually discover how ignorant you were in the beginning. That is, this knowledge is a sea. And it never ends. In the beginning, okay, I don't know any fiqh. And I maybe used to listen to this discussion, that discussion. I read one book of fiqh. Okay, I think I know everything. I start arguing and condemning and no, this is right and no, this is wrong. And I think I'm filled with knowledge. But you read a more, books more in depth with more analysis, comparing opinions, and you say, wow, this is complicated. Because the book that I read was simple. Now this is really complicated. You go into a more complicated book of fiqh and you say, subhanAllah, this is way, way beyond what I thought. So the more that you study and the more complex matters you receive, the more that you'll know that you really do not know. So a person in the beginning shouldn't rush and think that, I know, now I understand everything. As Allah Azza wa Jal says, وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. You've only been given a little bit of knowledge. So, keep with you that khulq, character of humility. Never dismiss someone who knows less than you, and never argue with someone who knows as much as you, and never try to argue also with someone who knows more than you, but keep listening and keep learning with the intention that I don't want to argue, but I want to discover the truth of what Allah Azza wa Jal has said. And whatever His Prophet ﷺ has said. So not for the sake of argument, not for the sake of raising yourself above other people, but simply because you want to learn. Now, and he also says, last point in this chapter I want to talk about. He says, Abu Hanifa, he says, قال لأصحابه عظموا عمائمكم ووسعوا أكمامكم وإنما قال ذلك لألا يستخف بالعلم وأهله. He says, Abu Hanifa, it is reported about him or from him, rahmatullahi alayhi, that he said to his students, aggrandize your turbans, make them bigger, and also your sleeves. And so he says, the explanation of why that he says, لألا يستخف بالعلم وأهله, so that people do not belittle the people of knowledge, so that the masses do not belittle the people of knowledge. So basically what Abu Hanifa was saying there, rahimahullah, is that distinguish yourself or actually dress well. If you are a person of knowledge, right, you don't need to distinguish yourself with a specific garment or attire. That's not from the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? So that's important. It's not from the sunnah that if I'm an alim or a knowledge, I put a particular type of amama, turban, and that distinguishes me from everybody else. That's not from his sunnah. But what Abu Hanifa wanted there is that part of esteeming knowledge itself is that when you're going to come, when you're going to teach, when you're going to lead the salah, dress well. Dress well, so that people respect you, and through you they respect what? Al-ilm. So this dress well, that's what he is saying, right? The next chapter, he says, في اختيار العلم والأستاذ والشريك والثياب. He says, in selecting the knowledge, the type of knowledge that you need to seek, and your teacher and your partner, companion in seeking knowledge, and your clothes. How do you select them? So he says, and it's important for the seeker of knowledge to select the best of knowledge and what he needs in his deen, now and in the near future. So he learns first about Tawheed and learns the evidence of Tawheed. So what is important here, to note is that, as we said in the first lecture, right? Knowledge is like the sea. Where do you begin? What do you study? So he says, when are you going to begin something, as we said in the last lecture, what do you select? We said you select what you need right now. What's an obligation on you right now? And once you fulfill the obligations at this moment, then you move on to the recommended, or move into areas that you're interested in. And then he says, once you finish the obligations, you want to select from among the recommended, because now you want to even know more and more. He says you select from that knowledge the best. Now what is the best? He said, ilm al-tawheed. You begin with knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course, this is even more needed today. This is more needed even today. Because people in general are distant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you hear a lot of doubts about the existence of Allah. Why did Allah Azza wa Jal create? Does Allah Azza wa Jal care about humanity? Etc., etc. And because people don't have answers and have doubts, they are deviating and straying away from religion altogether. So you need to have answers to this first for your own self. So you need to understand the Tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal in detail and in evidence. How did Allah present it in the Quran? How did the Prophet ﷺ present it? What is Tawheed? Why do we believe in Allah Azza wa Jal? What do we know about the hereafter? What do we know about Qada and Qadar? What do we know about the limits of our own knowledge? Understanding these things is important today. So from kulli ilmin ahsanah, right? And also I'll add to that, also in addition to the best among all knowledge, also consider what you would be proficient at. That is, sometimes you study Quran. And there are basics that we need to cover in all branches. But sometimes you study the Quran. And sometimes you find yourself, subhanAllah, it's easy for you. If it's easy for you, continue doing it. Sometimes you study fiqh. And for some people, they find fiqh is difficult. After covering the basics, fiqh is difficult for them. But they excel in hadith. So the road or the path of hadith study is easy. Fiqh, not so much. Or grammar, is something that they crave. They really want to study Arabic grammar. But not so much, the discipline of Quranic study. They don't excel there, but they excel here. So also seek what Allah Azza wa Jal had made beloved to you, whatever Allah Azza wa Jal had made easy for you, because there is a reason behind it. So after you cover the basics, after you cover the obligations, you seek the best, but also couple with the best. What is it that you're interested in, and what is it that Allah Azza wa Jal had made easy for you? Because there might be a sign in it that this is the thing that Allah Azza wa Jal wants you to focus on. So that's why among the ulama you find what? Specializations. So this is a scholar of hadith. This is a scholar of fiqh. And even in fiqh, you have specializations. Even in hadith, you have specializations. Even in Quran, you have specialization. So it's very vast. And you cannot be a scholar proficient in all of these fields. That's very difficult today. So you want to focus. Cover the basics, but then focus on something. And if Allah had given you ease in it, then allow yourself to study, because maybe you will be able to benefit yourself and others through that field. And he said, وَيَخْتَارُ الْعَتِيقَ دُونَ الْمُحْدَثَاتِ. And you seek that traditional old knowledge, not the innovated knowledge. That is, you look at the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How did the Sahaba understand Islam? This is really important. How did the Sahaba understand Islam and practices? What did they emphasize? The Tabi'een, Tabi'een, the A'imma of Islam, those who follow the footsteps of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. What is it that they focus on? It says follow that, not what had been innovated. Because the innovated, though it is, subhanAllah, sometimes it's interesting, anything that is innovated, controversial, trendy, it may be interesting, but not necessarily beneficial. So at his time, he says, وَإِيَّاكَ أَن تَشْتَغِلَ بِهَذَا الْجِدَالِ الَّذِي ظَهَرَ بَعْدَ انْقِرَاضِ الْأَكَابِرِ. He says, do not occupy yourself by studying dialectic theology. أهل الكلام, علم أهل الكلام. The people of Kalam who would base their knowledge on reason only and arguing. What if this happens? What if that happens, right? So it's basically all dialectic, meaning you give me an answer, I give you another. And it's only based on reason. So their Islam, their Aqidah, their practice is purely rational or almost rational based on discussions and reason, not based on Quran and Sunnah. He says, do not occupy yourself with that type of pursuit, because that type of pursuit happened after the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the favored generations and the blessed generations. This is an innovation that happened in Islam. It will waste your time and will not grant you anything. And it is one of the signs of the Day of Judgment is the spread of ignorance. So subhanallah, what is tragic is that you would find that the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam doesn't know the religion of Muhammad. Or sometimes what's even more tragic is that when they want to go and seek knowledge, they seek knowledge in the wrong way and they end up being ignorant as they started. Because the path is not the right path. So he says, do not waste your time trying to seek it in a path that is not going to give you ilm. So where do I find this type of knowledge? A type of knowledge that is based on the athar. That is what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. How did he interpret the Quran? What is his authentic sunnah? How did the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum understand that and interpret it and live it? How did the Tabi'een do that? Tabi'een do that? And then the scholars who came after. You know, right? Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Al-Shafi'i, Malik, Abu Hanifa, and so on. All the way till today, but they follow the guidance of those scholars. So don't follow or be attracted to what is trendy and controversial and new. Because if it's new, it means that it is not from the guidance of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's attractive, but it's not beneficial. So he says, this is how you select this knowledge. Right? This is how you select this knowledge. And remember, and he will say here also, you will use consultation and istikhara for that. He says, if you want to choose your teacher, he's going to say this. But I'm going to also add and say, when you're going to choose, what do you want to study? What book you want to read? Consult and pray istikhara. Right? Why not? You say, okay, I want to study Tawheed, or I want to study the discipline of Quranic studies, or Hadith studies, or fiqh. What book should I use? What ilm, what discipline should I choose? Well, I'm not 100% sure. So I'll pray istikhara and ask Allah Azza wa Jal to guide me. And after I pray istikhara, I'll ask 1, 2, 3 people that I trust, who have the knowledge to actually guide me. And then they will tell you. Okay? So istikhara and mashura, a consultation. It says also when it comes to seeking your teacher, that's very important. فَيَنْبَغِي أَنْ يَخْتَارَ الْأَعْلَمَ وَالْأَوْرَعَ وَالْأَسَنَّ. He should choose the most knowledgeable and the most pious and the older from among the scholars. Right? So the most knowledgeable is obvious. Right? And the most pious, that's obvious too. Right? So, and the older. We're going to say, comment on the older, why it's the older. So when you're going to seek, you want to seek the person who knows the most. Right? So today, in today's world, when we listen to people, and when we take from them, and when we learn from them, what criteria do we actually apply in practice? Do we actually seek the more knowledgeable? I'm not talking about you in particular. I'm talking about us as Muslim masses. Do we seek the most knowledgeable? Who do we seek? The popular ones. Huh? No, we seek the most popular one. The ones who are popular, right? The good speakers. The controversial ones. If the media highlights someone, that's the person we listen to. If that video has a lot of views and the person is famous, we listen to that, right? And that's in a way in a sense I understand that's human nature. Have you ever been, walking in the mall or, shops and you find people lining up for one shop? What do? You say, wait, what's there? Maybe I should go and stop. I don't know what they're selling, but maybe I should stand in line because they're standing in line for a reason, right? Maybe I don't need anything there, but maybe I do, right? Maybe it's like an incredible sale. I'm going to stand in line. That's what I feel, right? I'm going to stand in line because there must be something there. So, of course, right, if there's a video that has 10 views, 100 views, and a video that has 1 million, which one are you going to click on? See, you're right, he's honest. The 1 million, of course, that's the one. He's going to attract even more and more people. So there's a difference between being curious and learning. There should be a difference between being curious and learning. And also there should be a sort of a filter that I have. Okay, before I click on this, okay? And there's clickbaiting, right? There's a title that will entice you to click. Okay, and a lot of times it's fake and exaggerated. But anyway, it'll entice you to click. But before I click, am I ready? Because that person may share with me type of information that may confuse me. Am I ready? If you're not ready, don't click. Because I get sometimes, somebody forwards a video to me and say, he said something confusing. Can you let me know, what's the answer to this? And I want to take a stick and hit them and say, why did you listen to it in the beginning, right? In the first place, because they say, it's really confused me. They say, why did you listen to this? Now it become my problem, not to solve your problem, right? But why did you listen to it? Because at times, it's easy to refute some of these claims. But other times, I can, or another person can do everything in their power to refute it, but already that doubt has settled in your head. It cannot be easily removed. You'll continue to struggle with it for years. Right? And that's why safety is the easiest and the best policy. I'm not going to listen to it until I have enough ilm. So if you are seeking knowledge, seek it from people who know. Not someone who is popular just because they are popular. Not someone who everybody listens to and so you decide that you want to listen to it. So how do you know that a person has ilm? How do you know? That's for you. Now, the ulama, so the ulama endorse him. So other people of knowledge, right? It's the same thing like, okay, you get sick. You want to see a specialist. Suppose that, I know we don't have a choice, but suppose you have a choice and you can see a number of specialists, any number of specialists. How do you choose? You could choose, exactly. So if you ask other doctors, who among those 5 specialists is the best? Right? They'll tell you which one is the best. Or, sometimes you go online and Google will rate them for you, right? He has these many stars, these many stars. If it's right, then you choose based on the ratings, right? Maybe the ulama could have that, right? No? Right. No, it won't be really reliable. Anyway, but other people, right? But especially people of knowledge who say, he's a alim, he's a alim, he's a alim. So if they testify to him, you know that he's a person of knowledge. That's the easiest. Huh? Or, sometimes qualifications. Where did he graduate from? What degree does he have? Where does he teach? That tell you that he has the credentials. But you still need the testimony of other scholars. So don't go and listen, randomly, but choose the most knowledgeable. And now on top of most knowledgeable, the second one is harder to ascertain. How do I know he's more pious? As far as I can tell. As far as I can tell, that person applies what he knows. So you follow that person. And if a person clearly contradicts it or is not following the sunnah in his appearance, in his speech, then you know that his knowledge is not very deep. Or he may not be able to benefit you. So you don't follow that person. You could benefit from him, possibly, but you don't follow or you don't make him your teacher, the teacher that you take from. And he says also the oldest. Now why the oldest? He says the most knowledgeable, the most pious, and the oldest. Why the oldest? Because wise, and he has experience. He's wiser and he has experience. And also shahwatu shabab, the desire of the youth, has probably left him. Right? So he's not going to be as tempted or easily tempted as a young person. So the young person is still might have the fantasies of, I want to be this and I want to be that. But when you get older, these fantasies start leaving you because they begin to replace by reality, by experience, and by wisdom. So that person is not seeking now the dunya as much, but is seeking the akhirah. In addition to, he had time to amass a lot more knowledge and a lot more taqwa also with him. And he says here, Abu Hanifa, he quotes, this is important, the importance of shurah, meaning, should I listen to so-and-so, should I study with so-and-so? The importance of shurah. So Abu Hanifa says, I heard from a wise person, from the wise people of Samarkand, that one of the students of knowledge asked me, who should I go to and study with when I go to Bukhara? And then I told him. So Abu Hanifa here is saying that this is a model for the student of knowledge. I want to travel and study with so-and-so, or I'm here and I want to study with this person or that person, attend this halaqah. Should I? Does it benefit me? Is he reliable? Ask. And it's not ghiba. But here, ask the people of knowledge. It's not ghiba for a knowledgeable person to say about another person, no, he's not knowledgeable, don't take from him. As long as the intention is advice, right? Not competition, but advice, right? And he says, and this is beautiful, he says, and so he should consult in all of his matters. Because Allah Azza wa Jal commanded His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to consult in all matters. And no one was smarter than Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? You could not come up with someone smarter than him and more pious than him, and yet Allah commanded him, وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ, and consult them in matters. So this command to him sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says he used to consult with his companions, and you can see in his sunnah he used to do this often. He used to consult with his companions in almost everything, right? Unless a clear command came from Allah. He says even in household matters, he would talk to his wives and he would consult with his wives. Because as he says here, someone else, Ali ibn Abi Talib, he quotes Ali ibn Abi Talib, radiyallahu anhu. He says, men, or we can say people, are of three types. A person who is a full person, a person who is a half person, and a person who is a no person. So the person who is a full person, a person who is wise and he consults. A person who is a half person is a person who is wise and does not consult. And a person who is a no person is a person who is foolish and does not consult. So if you want to be a full person, what do? You be wise. If you're not wise, what do? Ask Allah for wisdom, right? If you're not wise, ask Allah for it. So you're wise, but you also don't forget to what? Consult. And if Allah Azza wa Jal did not give me and you that wisdom or that experience to be able to know right from wrong and what to do, at least don't forsake consulting. Because you will add people's experience to your own, their mind to your own. And that's why you will be smarter whenever you consult. But of course, who do you consult? I just grab somebody from the street and say, what do you think? Right? I just come to Salah and Isha, I find who's right next to me. Hey, I have a problem. Come. Does that work? You need to select. So your selection also is a sign of your own wisdom. Who am I asking? Because the person who you're asking, the type of person will give you the quality of the response. So you need also to select. Now, and that's Ja'far al-Sadiq, he said, شاور في أمرك الذين يخشون الله عز وجل. He says, consult those who fear Allah. Consult those who fear Allah. So fear Allah, why? Because first of all, they'll be afraid that if they give you the wrong advice, they'll be accountable. So they're not going to say something that will hurt you, or say something out of ignorance, or say something just to sound smart. And if they don't know, they'll say, we do not know. And that's also part of knowledge as well. If somebody comes and consults you, when somebody comes and asks you a question, and you do not know, what are you supposed to say? I do not know. Because if you say something that is not true, you're going to have to answer to two. Allah Azza wa Jal first, that you lied about him and you say, this is what Allah wants or this is what Allah hates, just by conjecture, dhann. And you're going to have to answer to that person that you gave him bad advice. Huh? And sometimes when you give bad advice, you can destroy a person's life. So if you're going to consult the wise. And if you are consulted, only speak about what you do not know. And then he says, when you're seeking knowledge, seeking knowledge is of the most important and more difficult things to do. So of course it needs consultation more than anything else. And same thing, when you go to college or university, you want to pick a major, make sure that you consult and make sure you talk to people, talk to professionals who are working in that field so that you understand what you want to do with it when you graduate. So that you have a better idea. So when your child, you think, I want to send him to college, university. It's not just simply just performance. He has to go or she has to go. For what? What do you want to do with it? You have to ask, what do I want to do with it? So when I graduate to do what with it? So you consult people who are in it, they're studying it, consult people who had graduated, consult people who are working with that degree, visit them, visit that facility, work as an internship, for instance, in the summer, so that you'll understand what it means to work with that profession or in that profession. And then you'll know. So that's also a type of consultation with people of experience. And he says, rahimahullah, he says, and when you pick your teacher, he says you be patient with them. And he'll talk, inshallah, about how you should be, how to honor your teacher, but that will be, inshallah, for next week. But he says, if you pick a teacher, you have to be very patient with them and very patient in seeking knowledge as a principle. Because he says, وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ الصَّبْرَ وَالثَّبَاتِ أَصْلٌ كَبِيرٌ فِي جَمِيعِ الْأُمُورِ. A very foundational principle in all matters is consistency and patience. And he says, as it says in this verse of poetry, لِكُلٍّ إِلَى شَأْوِ الْعُلَى حَرَكَاتُ وَلَكِنْ عَزِيزٌ فِي الرِّجَالِ ثَبَاتُ. He says, everyone wants to be better and plans to be better, aspires to be better. In fact, they could take steps to be better. But the people who are consistent and patient in that pursuit are very few. And that's the difference. All of us dream about being better, don't we? I want to learn this. I want to earn more. I want to, learn this thing and that thing, excel in this and excel in that. So all of us have these grand, ideas about what we want to do. But all of us have them, but those who take the actual steps towards it are fewer or less than the totality. And among those who take steps towards it, take a class, attend a halaqah, start reading a book, those who stick to it and are consistent, are patient, are among the fewest of the few. That's why people who accomplish, who finish a book, who finish a degree, who accomplish and become accomplished scholars are not the majority of humanity, but the few among humanity, because consistency is dear, is precious. It's not available to all. Patience is dear and not available to all. So he says, you must persevere and you must be patient, and then you will attain. As it was, he says, he says, what is bravery? He says, sabru sa'a, being patient for an hour, for 1 extra hour. Okay, what is bravery? قال الشجاعة صبر ساعة, and it rhymes. That's why it's nice. الشجاعة صبر ساعة. To be brave is to be patient for 1 more hour. So what is the difference between a coward and a brave person? 1 hour, right? It's 1 hour. Because the coward says what? When you see a person, and he's coming and he's growling and he seems fierce, and you decide what? Better I run away, right? Save myself, save my skin, you run away. You run away. But if you stand to face them, again, that's not an invitation for anybody to fight. Right? You say after Aisha, is going to meet somebody in the parking lot, we're going to start a fight just to prove that I'm going to apply what I learned, right? That's not an invitation for confrontation. But I'm saying that when it's inevitable, what is the difference between a person who runs away and the person who wins? Is that the person who wins, the person who's brave, decided to stay. So that's the difference. That's what wins battles. So where does this sabr comes from? Well, because there's a goal, there's something that you want to accomplish. So if you know that you want to accomplish something, you know, okay, it's difficult to read this book, but why did I start reading it? Because there's benefit behind it, and the pleasure of Allah Azza wa Jal is at the end of it. I'll continue to read. But if I am someone who's not serious about it, the first page, second page is difficult, I'll just quit. Because it's easier to quit, because there's nothing to tie me to it. So if I believe that there's benefit, there's a goal behind what I'm doing, I can be patient. So you have to see the goal behind talabul ilm, why you're doing it. And so you need to be patient for it. And if you have a little bit extra patience, then you'll be able to accomplish what you want where others have failed. And he says he continues to learn from so and so and does not quit just because he's tired and impatient. And continues to read in a book and does not quit because he's tired and impatient. And continue to study in a field and does not stop because he is tired and impatient. Because if you keep moving from one book to the other, one teacher to the other, one discipline to the other, you're not going to learn. So you need to be consistent. Like for a person who's taking a class, it's difficult. I'm going to drop it. Take another class. It's difficult. I drop it. Do you graduate? No. But if you force yourself to stay, then you'll finish that class. Then you have one class. Then if you take the second and the third, and so eventually you will graduate. So it's the same principle and application. If you keep moving from one to the other without finishing any, you're not going to learn anything. وَيَنْبَغِي أَنْ يَصْبِرَ عَمَّا تُرِيدُهُ نَفْسُهُ وَهَوَاهُ. And he needs to struggle with his nafs, his desire, his weakness. Well, okay, I'm reading, I'm in the halaqah, but I'd rather be playing outside. Because that's nice, but what is that going to give you? So this is what you need to tell yourself. And ask Allah Azza wa Jal for patience. It is not easy to sit and read a book today. Sahih? And it's not easy to be in a halaqah today. The attractions outside are so many and so glamorous that it's just subhanAllah. Sometimes you're in the masjid and you're thinking about the outside. So and sometimes you're in the masjid and they're with you on your phone inside. So it's very difficult not to be tempted by all of that. So how do you stay? You need that patience, and you need to ask Allah Azza wa Jal to grant it to you. So patience with reading a book, patience to be in a halaqah, patience to be in the masjid, patience in seeking knowledge, and you have to keep reminding yourself of why you're doing all of this. Why are you leaving the dunya for the akhirah? Right? Why are you leaving the dunya for the akhirah? And subhanAllah, sometimes we think that if we leave the dunya for the akhirah, we've lost the dunya. Right? Like if we leave the dunya for the akhirah, we lost something outside. We're missing out. But if we stay outside, then we've won everything. But the reality of it is that if you leave the dunya for the akhirah, Allah will grant you the akhirah and the dunya. Together they will come to you in the best way. And if you leave the akhirah for the dunya, you've lost the akhirah and the dunya. خسر الدنيا والآخرة. You lose both of them. And so the Sahaba of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you want an example, when they were in Mecca, some of them were rich or not? Some of them were poor, but some of them were rich. So when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told them that Allah had commanded them to migrate, what did they take with them? Nothing. So they left all their property and they left to Medina, poor. The rich among them, they left poor. Nothing had with them. So they sacrificed everything. So this is a hijrah, like a refugee. Actual refugees, right? Because they left with nothing. But in Medina, because they were patient and patient and patient, and in the beginning of talabul ilm, you may need to be patient like that. But patient and patient and patient, what did Allah make them? They became rich or not? They're rich. In fact, not only did they become rich, as they said, this person became the provincial leader of Iraq. That person, the provincial leader of Damascus. That person is the head of Mecca. That person is the head of Medina. The Sahaba who had left this, and others had caravans and caravans of money. Because Allah wanted to show you through them that if you leave the dunya for my sake, I'll give you the dunya. But in the beginning, He'll test you to see what? Are you sincere or not? That is, if you leave, if what happens, and this, by the way, is general, right? General for everybody. If you leave something for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal, in the beginning, it's going to be hard. And you may be tested. And that's why he also says, وَيَصْبِرُ عَلَى الْمِحَنِ وَالْبَلَايَا, and you be patient with adversity. In the beginning, you'll be tested. So Allah wants to see, are you sincere? Or are you going to quit at the first sign of trouble? If you quit at the first sign of trouble, then you are not serious. And with the next, and the next, and the next test, you're not going to actually be firm. So you're going to collapse anyway. But if you decided to be firm and patient, then after the initial test, Allah will give you the dunya and the akhirah. Right? So the people of ilm, the people of knowledge, especially the pious among them, right? The salatin, the sultan, would come to them and ask for the consultation. And they will ask them, what can I give you? What can I give you? Right? Yani some of the khulafa, maybe one of the khulafa of Banu Abbas, maybe Harun al-Rashid. So he would go to Hajj, and of course, Harun or anybody else, right? He would go to Hajj, of course, and for people to give him, path, he would have his guards, and the guards would give him way. Allow the Khalifa to pass, allow the Khalifa to make tawaf, and all of this. And then the mother of that Khalifa, once she was, by the Khalifa, and she was in Mecca, and she heard some noise. She looked outside, and she saw a lot of people, and she said, who and so and so? And I think it was Ata, I think if I'm right, but Allahu A'lam. And they said, this is Ata. Ata is from the ulama. Ata is coming, and the people are around him, and they're clearing the way for him. She said, Wallahi, he says, by Allah, this is mulk, not the mulk of Harun. This is power. This is being a king, not the kingship of Harun. Because the kingship of Harun, and Harun was of the best khulafa, by the way, and this is not a condemnation, but the kingship of Harun needs guards, needs power, needs might to be established. Ata, when he walks, his ilm paves the way for him. His ilm clears the way so that he can make tawaf. Not that he asked people for it, but people out of love, they say, Ata has come, clear the way for him, clear the way for him. Until today, we do that with our ulama, isn't it? We find the alim who fears Allah Azza wa Jal, whom people had loved. When he comes, this person wants to carry his bag, this person wants to open the door for him. He does not ask for it. But this is an expression of people's love. So this is it. This is it. You should never seek knowledge, demanding this or expecting that. But if a person seeks it for Allah Azza wa Jal, not wanting anything but the pleasure of Allah, then Allah Azza wa Jal will grant him this, so the dunya and the akhirah, as long as he does not ask for the akhirah. So he says, and this is inshallah, we will end with this inshallah. He says, خَزَائِنُ الْمِنَنْ عَلَى قَنَاطِيرِ الْمِحَنِ. So he says, the treasuries of Allah's bounties will come, but after a lot of adversity. So qanatir al-mihan, that people will be tested a lot. So if a person is doing ilm, seeking knowledge for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal, don't expect it always to be easy, always to be paved, your path paved with roses. It's not going to be like that. For some time, you'll be tested. For some time, it is going to be difficult. It's difficult to be a pious Muslim today. But if you are consistent and you're patient and you ask Allah Azza wa Jal for support, and you need to do that, then Allah Azza wa Jal will give you from His bounties, will give you from His treasures, because Allah Azza wa Jal sees that you're honest. And if you're honest, Allah will grant you. Bi-idhnillah. Right? So inshallah, we'll stop here, and we'll see inshallah if you have